Välkommen till den lättsamma podden Let Me Know om den amerikanska rockgruppen Kiss med Marco och Bernt. Nu kör vi!
When it's really, really hot out, you can't get away from it. There's no denying it. So this show is hot in the shade. No matter where you see it from, no matter where you are, it's hot.
This episode will be in English, but first a brief introduction in Swedish. För idag är det jag, Daniel och min vän Mark från Kanada som kommer att snacka om The Kiss Riff, Kiss-riffet. Det kommer att handla om de bästa gitarriffen som Kiss någonsin skapat. Vi har tagit med varsin gitarr för att förklara och leka med våra favoritriff. Men först en kort introduktion. Well, hello, Mark, and welcome to the Let Me Know podcast.
Hi, Daniel. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, and I hope you're doing fine as well. We'll start off by, telling the listeners a little bit about ourselves, because they might not be familiar with us. I'm Daniel, and I'm from Sweden. I first got into Kiss in 85 when I heard Heavens on Fire, and some of my favorite albums are probably Asylum, Creatures of the Night, maybe Alive, and I do like some of the riffs in some of the Kiss songs, so it will be really interesting to see what Mark has come up with today and what he thinks about my picks and so on. But what about you, Mark? When did you get into Kiss and can you tell us a little bit about your favorite albums and so on?
Okay, well, I live in Canada. I live in Brampton, which is just outside of Toronto, actually. I got into Kiss pretty young, mainly because of my older sister. I have a sister that's 7 years older than me, and she was big into Kiss. And my introduction to Kiss was actually when she bought a 7-inch 45 of Lick It Up. It was the very first thing I actually heard in our house. And then after that happened, sometimes she would have to babysit me because my parents would both work. So when we came home from school, she would take care of me and we would go over to her friend's house. We lived in an apartment building and the person upstairs had a huge collection of Kiss stuff. This guy, he had posters and everything, he had a Live 2 things and all kinds of things. So I got introduced to that. And I remember seeing the picture of the Live 2 with Gene with the blood and all that on his face. And I was like, wow, what the hell is that? So I got introduced that way through her friends. And after that, I just, got really deep into it. My favorite Kiss album, and I think that most people who listen to the FAQ podcast know this, is that my favorite album is Rock and Roll Over. That's my favorite Kiss album of all time. My favorite Kiss album with no makeup, though, is Asylum. But my favorite overall record is Rock and Roll Over.
Gene Simmons, Peter Criss, Paul Stanley, Ace Frehley, Kiss. Rock and Roll Over. Kiss, Rock and Roll Over. Casablanca Records and Tapes. Kiss, Rock and Roll Over.
Yeah, cool. So we might have to mention for the listeners that both of us are on the Kiss FAQ podcast, if they don't know. So please go and check out some of those episodes. I think we're closing in on 500.
Yes.
So there are quite a few. And me and Mark has been there since the start. So I think we've been doing that for 8 years, maybe somewhere around there. So. Okay, let's get started then. But first off, I would like to hear a little bit about what you know about Sweden, Mark.
I don't know that much about Sweden. I mean, I know one thing that I do know is that obviously they have a very good hockey team. Being from Canada, hockey is important for us. And, some of the great hockey players of all time, Börje Salming, Mats Sundin, all these people are from Sweden and
Toronto guys.
Yeah, and because they played in Toronto, we're aware of them, right? Also, I know that you guys have similar weather to us in that you have a very long winter, like we do as well. I also know that you guys have a really good government system as far as taking care of your seniors, I believe. I think that you guys have a system where the senior citizens over there, once they go into retirement, are taken care of pretty well, much better than in Canada, to be honest. So I know a little bit about that. Correct me if I'm wrong, Daniel, about that. But Am I wrong?
It has gotten worse in later years, but it's economics and all that. But I think in general, and if you compare to other countries, also in Europe, I think we have a pretty good healthcare overall.
Yeah.
What about Swedish music then? Do you know any bands from Sweden?
Of course. I mean, that was the one thing I was going to say. I mean, obviously, one of my favorite bands is Opeth, and of course, they are a Swedish band, and I've followed them since Blackwater Park. That's for a ways back when they were doing, or even Orchid, right? So I'm very much into them. If I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, ABBA's Swedish, right?
That's true.
Yeah, and my parents were big. They have every single ABBA album in our house we had, so we were very familiar with that end of it as well. I'm trying to think. There are many other bands from Sweden that I'm familiar with. I'm trying to remember some of the names of them though.
Well, Backyard Babies, maybe you have heard of, or the Helicopters, or
the Helicopters I've heard of. Yeah. But I'm mostly more into like the metal stuff. I'm trying to remember some of those bands because I was really into. There was a huge scene from Sweden in the 2000s.
Evergrey, maybe Evergrey.
Yes, Evergrey. That's the band. I love that band.
Make you shiver. Join the world of greater learning. Crown me king and be my servants.
And they were very much a part of that new scene of metal in the 2000s when lots of bands were coming out of Sweden. There was a whole, In Flames, for example, that was a big band from Sweden that started a whole genre of a different type of melodic thrash metal. So, and Sweden was very well known for that.
Yeah, that's true. Entombed was an early band.
Yes,
when it comes
Entombed.
to Doom and Death, yeah. So we've exported quite a lot of music when you think of that we're such a small country. So we've been really successful when it comes to music for decades. Let's move on to today's topic. And today's topic is the Kiss riff. So me and Mark, we've picked 10 of our favorite Kiss riffs, and we brought a guitar, and we're going to play some of our favorite parts for you and discuss what we like about them and so on. I don't really know where this will go, but it sure will be interesting to hear about your favorite riffs, and let's talk a little bit about them. So I think you, as a guest from Canada on the Swedish podcast, maybe you can begin with your first riff, number 10.
Okay, so number 10 on this list that you have on here is different than the list I sent you, but I'll follow your list here since it doesn't really matter how I play them. So the first riff that you have on here for number 10 is Unholy from the Revenge album. Now, keep in mind here, I play guitar pretty regularly, but playing Kiss songs I don't play on an everyday basis, so it might be a bit rusty. Okay, so Unholy, from the very first time I heard it, I remember when it started the song, it started like this. So I remember when when I first heard that, I was like, wow, what the heck was that? Like,
Well,
it seemed
when did
very heavy.
did you see the video first, or did you hear it on the radio or at a friend's house, or when did you first hear it? Maybe you don't remember.
I actually do remember because we bought the album when it first came out, me and my friend Ted. And we bought it. We went back to his house because he was in a band with me at the time, right? So we bought it. We ran back to his house, put it on his stereo system, and that was the first thing that came out. That whole backwards beginning, to dun 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 dun, and it kicked in. We're like, wow. We were like amazed because don't forget the record before this was Hot in the Shade, which was pretty much demos like a demo recording. So this was such a fantastic sounding record. It was so full, big drums, Eric Singer on drums too, so it sounded very huge, very metal sounding, so we were very much into it. So that instantly was a great introduction to hearing that new album was Unholy. And then the video, of course, just put it over the top.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite songs of all time, and that riff is truly greatness. I wonder how much Gene had to do with that song and how much Vincent did on that song. The lyrics that's Vinnie Vincent.
Yeah.
The riff, I'm not so sure about.
The riff, I think that riff that I played was Vinnie. I think where Gene comes in is more when he does more like the riffs after, like the chordings and stuff like that, like Unholy, like that stuff. I think is more Gene, right?
Yeah, it's a great song. I just wish there were one or two more of that caliber on the album. I think it was way better than the rest of the album. Even though the album sounds great and so on, I wouldn't put it in my top 10, I think.
No.
But it's a good album. It's a good album. Okay, my first riff is an old one. It's I kind of liked it because I think I heard it on the Revenge tour. I saw some bootlegs from there, and they did this one. Hotter Than Hell, and the outro riff. I always liked the outro riff, and it's hard to separate between the riff and Ace's solo. They are so intertwined. I love how Ace plays over that riff, and somehow it just stuck the first time I heard it, and it really sounded great on that Revenge tour. The Revenge tour, when we spoke about Unholy didn't work live, but that tour, I think, in America was really cool and very visual, with the Statue of Liberty and everything. And too bad it was the wrong time, it was time for newer bands, Soundgarden and Nirvana and all that. So they had to cut the tour short. But some of the early stuff are simple, but it just sticks when you hear it.
Oh, yeah.
So that's an old favorite of mine.
And it's funny, when you played that riff, I smiled because I remember that when I read an old interview with Kiss, they were saying before that they had lots of influences when they were growing up. And one of the influences that they had was Black Sabbath. And I always thought to myself, Black Sabbath, where does that come from? But you know what? That riff that you just played there is classic Black Sabbath. It almost sounds like Sabbath Bloody Sabbath in a way. All right, if you were to play it a bit different, right? So, and it definitely has that Black Sabbath influence in it, and that's probably one of the rare songs that Kiss has in their catalog that has that sort of obvious reference to Black Sabbath.
Black Sabbath was an early influence for me personally when it came to starting playing the guitar. Some of those early songs are really simple, but you sound like a guitar god when you play them.
Yeah,
everything from Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, to Paranoid, to,
or even the first song, like.
It's nasty. It's dark. It's the first heavy metal riff, maybe.
Yeah, it is.
At least. Yeah, it's what started it all. So they made a lot of great music, Black Sabbath, back in the day. But I also liked some of the later stuff with Dio that they did.
Oh yeah, for sure.
In the early 80s, and one or two songs from that, The Humanizer, that came in the early 90s.
I love that album.
I think it's a great album and cool lyrics, and unfortunately it bombed. It didn't make the impact that they were hoping for, so they left shortly after. Yeah. So that's our number 10s.
So for number 9, I got something from the Love Gun album. And of course, Love Gun is one of those records that people either really, really like or they don't like as much. But one of the songs on there that was instantly captivating to me was the one that Ace Frehley played on, which was Shock Me, which goes... Yeah, so that riff there is really cool. I mean, I remember when I first heard that, I was like, wow, that's really catchy. And then to hear Ace come in with his, his classic style of saying, the lightning's all I need, like that kind of like drunken singing that he does. Yeah, exactly. It's very New Yorker, right? And I just thought it was one of the coolest things ever. And it also has one of his, more known guitar solos that he's done probably in his career. So I've always thought that was a very strong guitar riff that he wrote, and one that, Paul and Gene could not ignore. And when they heard it, they immediately knew that was going to be on the record.
Yeah, I also like Peter Criss's drums on that one.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, fantastic drumming on that.
So my number 9 is actually a pretty new song. And the reason I picked this one, or new, it's by Kiss standards, it's a new song. So it came out in, I think, 2009 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the first time for a very, very long time that I wanted to pick up the guitar instantly when I heard a new Kiss song. I guess the time before that was probably Unholy in 92. No riff had caught on for me, but this one did. And it's from a song called Modern Day Delilah. He played around a little bit with it and did some variation. It kind of reminded me a little bit of the classic Kiss songs with Paul, from 76, 77, when he actually had a riff in the songs. Like these ones. Like these ones. Like that one? Or...
Yeah.
Well, you can go on and on with Paul in 76, 77.
Of course.
He has loads of cool riffs, but then he forgot about it for a while, I think, and you could only hear it from time to time. But Modern Day Delilah and later on Hell or Hallelujah had some cool riffing, even though Hell or Hallelujah is pretty darn close to a classic Deep Purple song, but it still sounds great. So some love for the newer Kiss with Tommy and Eric. So Modern Day Delilah in place 9.
Mm-hmm.
What about your number 8 then?
Well, number 8 for me was kind of a no-brainer because I always liked this song. And the funny thing was, because it ended up on the end of the album, this particular record, I if it wasn't for the fact that it was such a good record and I listened to it from beginning to end, if it wasn't a good record, maybe I would have turned it off and I never would have discovered this song. But because I listened to the whole record and I heard this, I was like, wow, this is such a great song. And I'll just play it for you really quick.
Boom, boom, boom.
That song really stuck with me because I love that introduction riff that he plays, that whole da-na-na-na-na. And the fact that Gene said that he wrote that on a small Casio keyboard makes me laugh because I'm trying to imagine how that sounded on this little keyboard, ding 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 ding, and then he translated it to guitar.
Yeah, that song, that riff is on my list as well at number 5. And I always thought of it as, when you play it, you kind of want to, you do a vibrato. Bruce Kulick wanted to do that as well, but Gene told him, no, you can't bend the strings on this song. It's supposed to be like Godzilla or something, dinosaur walking around. And he was completely right. It's much better if you don't do the vibrato and you just play it straight. So,
absolutely.
He has some sense of music at times, Gene as well. So that's just an awesome riff and an awesome song, and they do it to this day. That's a great pick, War Machine. Let's move on to mine then. And the next song for me is also a heavy Gene song.
Oh, yeah.
Early one. Yeah. It was actually a Paul song in the beginning, but I guess your favorite producer, Bob Ezrin, saw that this was something for Gene. So he made Gene sing this one. It's God of Thunder from 76, a heavy riff. It goes like this. Often when I rank the songs, I end up with a lot of Paul songs in the top 10. But this is one of my, I think I'd put it in the top 10 category. And the riff, it works so well in this song. And I'm glad they redid it and didn't go for Paul's version, a more up-tempo version. So it's kind of similar to War Machine. It's a real slow song. War Machine and God of Thunder are really slow songs and kind of, sister songs to some extent. I like them both.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great pick. I mean, look, I know I make comments about Destroyer all the time about how much I dislike the album. It is my least favorite Kiss album of all time. But that song shows its real power and how it should have been in live performance. I mean, and I say that a lot about the songs from that. I mean, when you hear any of those songs from that record in a live capacity, they always usually sound much stronger live than they do on studio, in my opinion.
Detroit Rock City, I think, is heavier on a live too than on the album. But if you're into the Bob Ezrin's production, I think there's a lot of fans of the album. It's kind of funny that you rank it dead last.
So my next one, if we're going to move on to number 7, is ironically from the same album that you just played from. And considering that how much I dislike this album, you would think that there'd be nothing from that album on my list, but you're wrong. I do actually have something from there. And of course, it's this song. So when you hear that, like right away, I did a little screw up there, but it's funny that riff is not overly complicated, but it is tricky if you don't watch your timing on it. So it's interesting now. Paul Stanley has come up with some very interesting riff-based licks like that, where it's a lot of single note stuff. I mean, Paul also has a lot of fantastic songs that he came up with using chords, which I'll show later in my list as well. I'm sure you will as well. But that sort of single note line thing is really cool how he does it. And later on, of course, he has the guitars underneath it, right? But the thing that I've always disliked about the studio version of it is when you get to the part like, you have this big like piano underneath it. Dun, dun. It sounds like Elton John. Like, what did he do? Putting a piano underneath there? Like, come on. I mean, there should be no pianos on a song like that.
Yeah, Detroit Rock City. You can't go wrong with that one. My next pick at number 7, I think. Yep. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a bit similar to the riff you played, but it's from an earlier album, actually the album before, from Dress to Kill. And you play Detroit Rock City. It's like this. And the riff I will play now is kind of similar, I think. It's one of my favorites from the early one. It's been performed with flutes as well in the riff early goings.
Yes.
I didn't like that version, but this one with electric guitar is kind of cool. She from Dress to Kill, because there are many similar riffs in that song that I like, and many parts of that song that I really like. And I remember watching the bootleg video that came from Tokyo 95, and they did the whole shebang, with a long ending and everything. Oh, I was blown away. And ever since that day, I really liked She. But if you want to listen to a different kind of sounding She, you go to Wicked Lester and listen to the flutes.
Yes,
that's really crazy.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the great songs. I mean, I remember when I first saw the live video that came from the Cobo Hall when they were showing there, and you see Paul in that spotlight, and he just walks up by himself and just. He does like the finger point, and then he does the chord, like that's so cool. Like, how they have it. And, it's such a simple riff, but it's so effective and powerful sounding. I think the next one here on my list, this one is a bit of a tricky one for me. I have a feeling I might bumble this one up a little bit, but it actually comes from the second album, Hotter Than Hell. Let me see if I can get through it here. So don't mind my mistakes here. Let's see if I can get this right. Oops. Sorry. Yeah, so that riff there is really tricky. That first one there, because it's in pentatonic, the chord shape, but just remembering that sequence of notes is not very, very easy at first, right? I mean, sure, if you were to play it every day for a week, then it will come to you probably like nothing to play it, right? But just off the top of your head, it's not the most easiest song to play. And again, it's one of those songs that has like a great guitar solo section too in there, right? When they do that whole section in the middle of the song. So I always thought that was one of the songs I really liked. And I don't know about you, Daniel, but I like the version on Hotter Than Hell, but my favorite version of that actually is the Eddie Kramer demos that they did at the beginning. Those 5 that they did. That version of on there is really good of that song.
I like it on the live albums, both on Alive 1 and Alive 3. But other than that, I really like the lyrics in that one. Probably the creepiest lyric in any Kiss song.
It's really a stalker.
Dark and, a stalker. So it really worked with the early image of Kiss. Kiss were much more dark and dangerous in those early years. Probably changed somewhere around Destroyer. But before that, I remember seeing pictures of them with girls with not so much clothing on and blood and stuff like that. They stuck with that when they understood that they could make more money with being not so edgy.
Yeah, I mean, that first line that he says there, too, like that limping as you do, I'm watching you there. It's funny. Limping like you do, I'm watching you. And I don't really know
don't really know.
Yeah,
just
that's
what
what
to
to
do.
do. Oh no. Yeah, it's really good. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the lyrics in that one. So my next one, let's see, where am I? Number 6. This
Yes.
is more of a pop song. You know, in '75, Paul wrote a lot of great pop songs for Just to Kill, I think. Come On, Love Me, Anything for My Baby, and so on. But my favorite riff is the one from Love Her All I Can. It's catchy, and I think it's sad that they never really did anything with this song live. I think it could have worked pretty well live. It's like a good pop album, I think, Dressed to Kill. I think it was the first time where the sound was okay, at least.
Yeah.
I think the 2 first albums, there's so much problem with the sound. I rather go to other versions, but the Dressed to Kill album, I think most of the songs sound pretty good, and it's clear and you know, crisp sound on that album.
Yeah, I mean, the main things that I think that were beneficial on Dressed to Kill was they had Electric Lady Studios. They were in number 1. Number 2, they had Neil Bogart, who was very much more concerned about writing catchy, quick songs. You know, that whole album is like 30 minutes, if that. Mm-hmm. And then they also had the advantage of having Dave Whitman, who was a fantastic engineer who appears on a lot of the records, even as far but down, I think, as far as Lick It Up, I think he's involved with Kiss. So he's a great engineer, much better than I think than the whole Richie Weiss and Kenny Kerner production team that did the first 2. So I definitely think that there was some good ingredients added to Dressed to Kill to make that such a great record. All right, so next up is number 5. Now, let me see in my list here. Oh, yes. So this is another one off of the good old Love Gun album. And again, I was talking earlier about Paul and how he could write some good single note riffs, but he could also write some pretty cool chord-based stuff. And this is one of the examples, I believe. Yeah, so that whole kind of riff, it's very much in C sharp, which is for Kiss is actually interesting because most Kiss riffs I find are either an E or an A with these guys. I mean, you know, like Lick It Up. It's an A, and then like, you know, it's an E, and they tend to stick to those sort of E and A, but to start in a C sharp right away, I remember that was one of the things that when I first heard it, I was like, wow, this is definitely a different key for them to be doing a song. And so, and I thought that was really cool how they did that. And I thought that whole use of the 2-note chording, how he did in there, is really cool with that whole. It really gives it that kind of power to it rather than doing something more single note.
Yeah, and probably one of the best openers of all time when it comes to a Kiss show.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Too bad they haven't played it for years now. You know, got fun of this song when you got a hold of those videos from Detroit 1990. Then they started with I Stole Your Love. And I think they hadn't played it for quite some time before that, but they started the show with I Stole Your Love, and it kicked ass.
Oh, yeah.
And since then, it's been one of my favorites as well. And I also love that riff. Good pick, Mark. Very good pick.
Thank you.
Next one is actually War Machine. So you have already played that, and I agree with all you said. So I'll go to my number 4. Number 4 is from the Animalize album.
Ah, okay.
It was one of the first albums I picked up as a cassette, and I, put it on the stereo, and the first song knocked it out of the ballpark, and the second one as well. The third one, not so much. It was Burn Bitch Burn. I didn't really like that at the time, even though it's a pretty cool riff in Burn Bitch Burn as well. But the first 2 songs, I played the tape over and over again. And the first song was, of course, I've Had Enough, Into the Fire. another gem, hidden
Yes.
gem that hasn't been played a lot. I mean, it goes something like this. I think it's such a cool riff, and
yeah.
one of the newer bands here in Sweden, Nestor, they kind of ripped that riff off for one of their biggest songs. So I never understood why they didn't play "I've Had Enough Into the Fire" more. Maybe it tanked live. They tried it at some shows in England, I think, in the beginning of the tour, but after that they never played it again. Awesome song and a good opener, as always in the 80s. They had a really good openers on the albums. So that was my number 4.
So my number 4 comes from my favorite Kiss album of all time, Rock and Roll Over. It's a song that I think most people, when they talk about what song did have had Ace Frehley's best guitar solo on it, a lot of people pick this song as an example of it. Not everybody, but a lot of people do. And it's funny because it's a song that Gene Simmons wrote, and it was inspired by the Three Stooges. So it goes like this. I mean, it's such a simple 4-chord thing, but it sounds so cool,
Yeah. I kind of like that the thing on the chorus. That's kind of a strange riff he does there, but it totally worked. It's almost like a bass line,
Yeah, I think it was kind of, because I think Gene wrote it on bass, but I think that his idea of it was based around a vocal idea like that. They call me Dr. Love. So he probably wrote it around that line and probably told those guys to just keep it simple with that. I think Paul might do like some chords under that.
Yeah, probably.
You know what I mean? While Ace does the line with Gene, right? But it's fantastic, And I mean that whole guitar solo part 2 is so great in that. It has that flanger effect and all that in there too. It's really cool.
Talking about flanger, my next pick is probably most known for the flanger effect.
Yes.
And you know what I'm talking about. It's from Alive 2, the studio side. And it goes like this. An Ace Frehley song. Mm-hmm. It's too bad it didn't end up on a real studio album, I think.
Yeah.
I think it would have done more than, but I think they released it as the first single off of Alive 2, but it didn't do that much. It's really about entering a black hole.
Yes.
But another example of Ace Frehley's classic Kiss riffs. And there's more to come on my list from Mr. Ace Frehley. But Rocket Ride always struck me as a cool song, fun song. And I would really love them to play it live. But I guess he preferred performing Shock Me instead. That's good as well. But Rocket Ride is one of my favorite Ace songs, and a cool effect he used there. He hasn't used a lot of effects through the Kiss years, but this was one of the times he did that.
Yeah, one of the things I heard about that, why they didn't play it so much, is because the guitar solo in that was, it's a long solo in that song, and it's a lot trickier than Shock Me for him, and it has wah in there and all kinds of stuff that, and you never see on stage for a Kiss show, like a wah pedal or any pedal on stage. So that's probably why they probably never did stuff like that, you know?
Yeah, probably.
All right. So that was your number 3.
Yes.
My number 3 comes from the second album again, which is interesting.
And Mark, I just have to say, this is the only song on your list that would be nowhere near my top 10.
Really?
I never liked this one, but maybe you can show me what's so good about it.
Well, I always liked the structure of the chord, how he bases it around a D bass note like that. So yeah, I always thought that was such a cool little sequence of chords and notes, and I always liked it too because I've always been a sucker for opening songs on a record. I've always thought that those kind of songs have to at least be catchy. They may not have to be the best song maybe, but they have to at least catch your attention so that you can continue listening to their whole record, right? I mean, you don't want to put a shitty song on the first spot because they're going to lose everybody's attention and they don't want to listen to the rest of the record. But I always like that idea of putting that D note in there and just putting those chords underneath it, right? Because you can have another guitar just doing to just give it more oomph, and the other guy just does it. So you can really make it sound really full.
It sounds great when you play it. I have to go and check that song out once again, maybe. And it got some love in later years. I remember it was the bonus track on the Japan Unplugged CD in 95, 96 there. And Paul has always said that it's one of his all-time favorite songs. And I think he played it on his solo tour there in 07, 08 or whenever that was. And in some spots here and there, it has been performed. So, yeah, cool pick. My next one is another Ace Frehley song.
Yes.
I do miss Ace Frehley. I did miss Ace Frehley's riffs through the 80s. I think some of the albums in the 80s lack a whole lot of riffing. They played a lot of chord-based stuff.
Yeah.
But here is one of his classic riffs, and it's from the early albums. It's from Hotter Than Hell. Mm-hmm. So it goes like this. It's such a simple but beautiful riff. It's almost heavy metal, I think.
Oh, yeah.
It's a very heavy song, and there's more riffs in that song that's pretty cool, like this one. It's such a good song. Yeah, so Parasite actually was played through the 90s a whole lot. I know they played it on the Revenge tour.
Yes.
And they played it, I think it, did they play it on the reunion era, during the reunion era? I'm not sure. I don't think so. I don't think they played it.
I think they did.
Well, not at the show I was, at least. They didn't.
Maybe the Lost Cities tour, maybe they might have did it.
Yeah, maybe. But I think it was so unfortunate that they didn't include it on a Live 3, because I think the version with Eric Singer was really heavy metal, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Heavy metal. And it felt so fresh and new when you heard it from the Revenge tour. Somehow they managed to put like 4 or 5 songs from Revenge on that album. I think they loved Revenge a bit too much, maybe. I Just Wanna and Domino should have been nowhere near that. War Machine, Tears Are Falling, and Parasite would have been real cool. And I think Parasite on Harder Than Hell sounds kind of cool. The muddy production works well for that song.
So my number 2 song comes from the first Kiss album, and this song and this riff has a special place to me, not because it's really anything too complicated, but back in the day when I was in this band, one of my first serious bands where we started playing a lot of clubs around Toronto and started, going out and touring and stuff like that. We would always learn a couple of cover songs for our encores. Whenever if we ever got called back on stage to play, we always like to do cover songs. And this was actually one of the songs that we did cover, and we played it quite a few times on stage. So I always have a fond memory of playing this song. Mm-hmm. Because of that, I can think back to playing, at the world famous Gasworks bar in Toronto, where Sebastian Bach first started singing before he joined Skid Row and stuff like that, cool. Right?
So, Mark, the other guys in the band, were they Kiss fans as well, or did they just appreciate that it was a good song?
The other guitar player was a diehard Kiss guy, just like me.
Okay.
Our drummer, he loved Kiss when Eric Singer joined, but he wasn't a Peter Criss fan. Mm-hmm. And our bass player, he was okay. He liked Kiss too. But the singer guy, he was pretty young compared to us. We were in our early 20s. He was about 18. And he didn't mind it. He thought that it was cool. He was getting into music still at that point, right? So it was still kind of, all the stuff was all new to him, right? But the riff is this. I'm sure you're going to recognize it for sure.
Cool. Yeah, you can't.
So Strutter. Yeah, I've always loved that song, and the solo is, it was pretty simple, and it was fun to play. I mean, those early first album stuff, there's a lot of the whole thing. A lot of that sort of stuff that Ace used to always do all the time.
Play the Firehouse solo. That's when he bent.
Yeah, it's a lot of that sort of bending. But you know what? People used to always say, "Oh, it's so simple." But you know what? Yeah, it might have been simple, but it sounded cool.
Yeah, hell yeah. People mix up complicated with good. It's not the same thing. It doesn't have to be complicated or advanced in order to be good. Many of the classic songs are real simple. It's 4 chords. It's almost the same chords in most of the songs as well. It's something else that makes a song great.
Yeah, and I mean, and just to give an example, we were talking about Sweden earlier in the show. But if, for example, if you were to go to 2 people on the street and say, do you remember how the guitar solo goes in Firehouse? And then ask them if they remember how the guitar solo goes in Far Beyond the Sun by Yngwie Malmsteen. I don't think they would remember Yngwie's.
As a guitar player, isn't it the fact that you tend to, like guitar-driven music, more advanced? I had a friend who became a guitar player, and he started off liking Wasp. But then it became almost too simple for him. So he went off and started listening to thrash metal and speed metal, mostly because he appreciated the talent, the way they play the guitar.
Yeah.
Has that ever been the case for you?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the case. I mean, when I first started, I was into very much Black Sabbath, and I was into Rush and stuff like that. And Rush was already kind of complicated at first for me too, but Black Sabbath was kind of my sweet spot when I first started learning guitar, because a lot of easier things to remember, paranoid, like that's easy to remember. And then you had, like all the things that you can easily play, right? But then when you had to start learning, Rush stuff, which is like, that stuff is like a little bit more complicated, right? And then, but then I started getting into like thrash stuff. I started getting into like bands like Megadeth, Nevermore, but I was getting into like Metallica and stuff like that. And it was mainly because as a guitar player, when you start playing, I think once you get to a certain level of learning, you want to be challenged a bit more, right?
Yeah.
So when you first hear albums like A Master of Puppets, then, you want to like right away figure out like, well, how did that go? Like, like you really want to learn all those little kind of riffs, right?
But you can never go wrong with Black Sabbath. I mean, some of their riffing are still classic.
Oh, yeah, of course. I've loved that.
That kind of stuff. I still love it to this day.
Yeah, or
there.
Yeah, it's the perfect Sabbath song, that right there. Right?
Yeah. Children of the Grave was always a favorite of mine.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
That was a killer to play when you started off playing guitar. So I guess we're at number 1 now. And
yes.
Funny thing is we picked the same song. 2 Kiss fans picking the same song. It has to be the best riff then.
Of course.
And do you want to do the honors and play the riff for the people listening? Let's hear it.
Sure, if you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Such a beautiful, great riff. And also, once again, the lyrics. I know you talked a lot about the first album being kind of New Yorkish, a New York vibe. Maybe you can expand on that a little bit. I think you hit the nail right on the head there.
Yeah, that album, the first record, and also Dynasty are the 2 records that when I hear them, I can immediately envision like downtown Manhattan and stuff like that. Because I remember when I went and played there with my band, the whole feeling of the city when you go down there, it has such a feeling to it, of activity and excitement to it. And when I listen to songs like that from the first record, I mean, sure, the first record's a little slow to some of the tempos and stuff like that, but you can definitely still feel the excitement of it being their first album. You know what I mean? When you can hear it in some of the playing, and especially in the vocals, I find that they sound very young and very excited. Like, listen to like Nothing to Lose with Gene singing on that. I mean, that's definitely somebody who's hoping that this is going to be one of many albums for him. Like, he's singing it so well that he wants to make sure that everybody's going to love it and that he doesn't have to go back to a day job after,
I think it's a perfect song for Ace as well, where he was in his life back then. And obviously he did a little bit too much drinking, so he ended up having a big problem with drinking. But in the beginning, when you're young, you can drink all night and then go to work in the morning.
Yeah,
it's a bit difficult, more difficult later on. It's almost a autobiographical song for him, I think. My favorite riff of all time. Not the most advanced, of course, but there's something about that riff. When they start that off live, I just love it. And he often starts with, he just does the...
Yeah.
Wah.
Oh, yeah, that...
Exactly. That's so cool. Yeah. Woo. Yeah.
Now, it's great, though, and I'm curious to hear your answer, Daniel, about this, is that one part in the song that... Now, that's what I was asking you. Gene's always claimed that that's his part. Do you believe that it's his part?
I think Ace actually said that it was Gene's part.
He did say it, yeah?
Yeah. So Ace said it. I've never heard Gene say it. So I guess it's... But Ace's memory is kind of fucked up. But it's possible. I don't think it's as strong as the main riff, that part, but it fits the song.
Yeah, it's a good tie-in to bring that part back in. Otherwise, it would have been the same part, those same two parts all the time. To add in that third part did give it a little bit of a change in it that made it even more catchier, I think.
So that's our top 10 Kiss riffs. You people out there might have different picks. Please write in the comments and tell us. But before we end this, I just want to ask you your favorite riff of all time, any band, Mark. My favorite riff actually came to me pretty late on. I think maybe 10, 15 years ago. I was watching an MMA event and a guy came out to a song, and I think you'll recognize it. Uncle Ted.
Oh, Ted Nugent, yeah.
It's Stranglehold with Ted Nugent. Yeah.
Interesting.
I never heard it. And, Ted Nugent was an opening act for Kiss more than once, I think. I never noticed that song at all. And then when I watched that MMA event, it just hit me like a hammer in the head. And I've loved it ever since. I don't have a lot. I don't agree with Ted Nugent's, political views, but that song is one hell of a song. Another one I like is "Bitch" of the Rolling Stones. That's a kind of a cool riff. I didn't know that Gene stole that riff when he did "Deuce." He said he took the riff off of "Bitch" and played it backwards. Then it became "Deuce." I don't know really how. I've tried playing "Bitch" backwards, and it doesn't really sound like "Deuce," but well. Maybe it was inspired by the Rolling Stones riff. Yeah. So, Mark, your favorite riff of all time?
Well, my favorite riff of all time, I actually have two, but the one that really sticks out right away is the one that you actually played a while back during the show. And of course, like I said, one of my earliest influences is Black Sabbath, right? Yeah. And that has to be... And then it goes to that whole dun dun dun. And there's one more that I actually like. Just give me a second. Oops. That's the chord there. Yeah, it's kind of tricky to play. There. Yeah.
That's a Van Halen song, isn't it?
Yeah, Unchained, yeah.
Yeah, the Black Sabbath riff is so cool. I always like the part you play there. That could have been one of my favorites as well. I think it's kind of reminds me of Parasite a little bit. The main riff from Parasite. It's kind of similar. Yeah.
Yeah, it could be. There's very much similarities in that too, right?
So that's the show today. Our top 10 favorite Kiss riffs. I hope you have enjoyed the show, and I have to thank you, Mark, for taking the time being with us here today. Thank you.
You're welcome,
Mark.
Daniel.
And if you're listening, chime in with your thoughts on this topic. And that's it for today. So from Mark and Daniel, peace out and go and listen to some Kiss music. See ya.
Take care.
And I hope you've enjoyed this because it's been a thrill for us. It really has. We enjoyed this. If we were funny or not funny, we tried our best.